he was focusing in the neuroimaging analysis, and after that, he decided with Vesna. I don't know if you try the name of Vesna because it's a
Brzykowska. Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, they together decided to make QMENTA around 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there they have already working on this company, like more 20 people.
Yep, 23.
Yeah, experimented growing up very well. So probably they are doing a very, very good work in your analysis. So,
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. It saved me some minutes as well. Well, good morning, everybody. I know it was a rough night, maybe, but here we are. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about the continuation of the work that we did or start doing in Netherlands about image processing and visualization of neuroimaging, especially diffusion MRI. It was a big part. So the techniques from MRI that allow us to reconstruct connectivity, brain connectivity, white matter, and so on. So that allow us to see inside the brain in a non-invasive way. As you know, the introduction pointed out, this is the work that we're also doing at QMENTA. We are an international team, people from expertise in medical image processing, neuroimaging, deep learning, so this more software and these kind of techniques. Business as well, of course. We are based in Barcelona, the R&D, most of the team, but also in Boston, the headquarters. And well, all the work that we are doing, and we're all going towards the same direction, and I believe also the people in the hackathon and also in the other cities, that is like this will to understand the brain, and our purpose as well is that, so to understand the brain, and especially to help understand what is happening with the brain, what is happening with brain disorders, and how can we work on how can we make that these brain disorders kind of become a thing of the past. So well, brain disorders are becoming a huge, a paramount problem in healthcare. The population is aging. We're all living longer and longer. So dementia, Parkinson, multiple sclerosis are becoming like the very prominent diseases that carries a huge cost to the governments, to healthcare. These are typically chronic diseases. Lots of money spent, let's say between quotes, wasted, that could be optimized. So there's also huge investments, lots and lots of funding, growing funds in investigating the brain, in acquiring data, so in a way, what was happening with the Genome Project some years ago, now it's like there's more initiatives like the Connectome Project, so mapping the brain and understanding, simulating, and really understanding how this blob of 1 kilo and something of kind of jelly, how does it work? What's happening inside? But well, the problem is the brain is obviously very complex. It has 100 or more billion neurons, 15 times more the population on Earth. So it's like incredibly complex to study. But also the other problem is like it has been stuck and protected inside the skull. So it has been very difficult to measure, to look inside and measure and see what's happening, right? Because measuring allows us to understand and understand how it works and how it doesn't work. Now, we kind of yesterday, like we had some nice talks, and I'm sure that today as well, like covering different techniques. So like very briefly, like how can we measure the brain? We are in incredible times with great technology, imaging technology from ex vivo to in vivo, from microscale, mesoscale, macro scale. And if we just briefly look at different techniques and like see them in the x-axis, like the dimension or how small each techniques are, if you can see. So we have like from very small techniques being able to take pictures of the synapses, of the axons, the cortical columns, and up to more millimeters and centimeters. So that spans techniques like electron microscopy, in mesoscale, the beautiful pictures of clarity and rainbow that maybe you saw in nature, that you can really see nicely the neurons. But while these techniques are ex vivo, so there is a sacrifice, and we, well, myself and in QMENTA also, we are a bit of fans of in vivo techniques like PET, SPECT, CT, MRI. The problem or the caveat is like it's in millimeters scale. However, it's in vivo, it's totally non-invasive, so it's very clinically feasible. And in a couple of minutes, you can have beautiful pictures of the different tissues. And the MRI is also very, very powerful machine. So like if you think that is a camera, you can take pictures in black and white, in color, in other modalities that capture different properties of the tissue. So then I'm going to go a little bit over them. Some of them were already yesterday, like T1 and fMRI already covered. I'm going to talk a bit more about diffusion. T1, as we saw, so like these are black and white slices, so 2D pictures, but usually 1 millimeter apart. So we stack them all together. We have like a nice 3D volume of the brain, and we can see nicely the white matter, the gray matter, the skull, the nice contrast. So we can see the major structures. Then we have diffusion weighted imaging. So these are, maybe you are familiar with the names DTI, Hardy, DSI, a bit more complex. So DTI, who's familiar with these techniques? Okay, 1, 2, or 3. So the idea with diffusion weighted imaging is, well, quite simple actually, with a metaphor. So if you think that the brain has the gray matter, so the axons, and then the neurons, and then we have the axons that are like fibers, so like spaghetti or like straws that are connecting the different parts of the brain. So if we think of that, and if we think that most of our body is full of water and water molecules, then what diffusion does, what it measures, is like if we think that we have a glass of water, an empty glass of water with just water, the water molecules, like in this case, they are moving freely because there's nothing that restricts the motion, right? So they are going around. But in the ventricles, so in these areas, the ventricles has no barrier, so the water moves freely. But in other parts, like the corpus callosum here, connecting the left and the right side, we have the axons, the white matter, that are like nicely packed fibers of straws or like little tubes. So if we think of that, and if we think that they are straws, in this case, the water molecules, they move more along the fibers, right? Because there's the wall, so the molecules, they bounce around in the walls, right? So the water moves faster, like in this direction, than across. So by doing this, what diffusion MRI does is takes lots of pictures in different directions, let's say, with the same MRI machine, but it takes lots of pictures, and this is an indication that the water moves more in a certain direction than the other. So by doing this, what we can infer is like in each position, there is a local orientation, a local structure of all these fibers. Yeah. So then what it allows us, like if we think of that, and if we have like a, like the connect the dots kind of game, so you have in each position a certain direction, then we can trace it and reconstruct the white matter. So this is a picture like seen from the side. We can see in blue the fibers coming. Oh, do you see my mouse? So you can see here like the fibers coming from the spine, going up to the motor cortex, the corona radiata, the SLF connecting like frontal and this part. So it's just a section, but so it can really capture at millimeter scale, so millimeter, the white matter, how is the brain connected with each other within itself. Now, diffusion can be it is a very big topic, a very big and hot field. I'm not going into details, but there's lots. So just to give you an idea, that the T1 images, so these structural images, they are simply a value per pixel in this 3D image, while diffusion, they are typically 60 numbers in each position. So then from that, there's a bunch of mathematics to transform this signal into something, usually a probability function, a spherical probability function, where it indicates like there's a preferred direction in each position. So there's like a, I don't spill this, like a cigar saying that in this direction is more probable that the water is moving in this direction. So there's a fiber structure like this. And there's many more techniques, more complex, from simple, like that can be modeled as simple spheres to multi-tensors, spherical harmonics, and a bunch of other things. So all of these to be more and more accurate in being able to identify different directions or different populations of fibers in each position, because we have a voxel, so we have like a partial volume effect. So because it's a discrete image, in each little pixel, you can have situations where you have fibers going in one direction, fibers in the other. So it becomes also a complex mathematical problem to solve. Where do these lines go? But not going into details here for the sake of time. So then we have T1, we have diffusion. They measure different things. They give us different information, different structures. So what starts to be really, really interesting and valuable is to start to put all these images in the same space and look at them and measure and extract information, different information from all of these images. So you have here a video showing a bit more in 3D. So you have a T1 brain that was already skull stripped. Then from the T1, what we can do is like do techniques like morphology, morphometrics. So they subdivide the cortex in different regions that relate to function, usually based on an atlas. Here we have the colorful lines are, it goes very fast. So the colorful lines are the white matter. And you can see nicely, if I can pause. So you can see nicely again. So seeing from the front, the blue fibers coming from the spine, going to the left or the right side, the corpus callosum here in the middle, connecting both. So you can really have a really nice image, visual image and 3D image of how is the brain connected. And if you start mixing all this information, we are able to then look into more detail of just a section of the corpus callosum, just at the fibers that connect, for instance, the motor fibers here that connect the brain stem and goes to the motor cortex. So we can really subdivide and analyze subcircuits of the brain. Yeah. Let's just move forward. And I'll give some more examples, some more applications that we're doing in the end. So then having all this information, we can start building some really interesting and useful algorithms like white matter clustering and segmentation. So like this is the work of the group of Paul Thompson's. This is our own work with Matt. So this an automatic way, so an algorithm to identify bundles, so circuits or fascicles of interest. So part of the corpus callosum here, the cingulum here, the corona radiata, so on and so forth. So then in an automatic way, you can really identify these fascicles and give this information to the scientist, to the neurologist, the neurosurgeon, for instance, so then they can measure and quickly evaluate what's different between my brain and yours, for instance. What bundle, so which part of the brain, which subcircuit is actually different from different populations. There's also some interesting techniques for visualization and uncertainty, so to simplify the way that this information is given to all the users, to the doctors, to the experts. So in the previous pictures, you saw it like all these lines, this colorful spaghetti. It's really pretty, really shiny, but to extract useful information, there's lots of clutter. It's very complex. There's lots of information to see at once. So that's why we had the techniques to segment the different bundles, and also some techniques for visualization, for instance, to illustrate like cartoon-like the fibers and the different fascicles, so to make it more intuitive, the user to analyze this kind of images. We have here on the left from the group in Eindhoven also how to visualize uncertainty. So like this is in the end sort of a probability of there is a track, there is a white matter there, but like how confident are we that in that particular position the track really exists or not. So these are some visualization techniques. fMRI and resting state we heard yesterday, like a very comprehensive and really nice talk, and I hope you share the slides. I think they'll be very useful, so I'm not going to over that. You mentioned a bit, so like from this functional MRI, then we can have these connectivity maps. So we are entering the realm of connectomics. So a framework, a mathematical framework, where we can extract from a certain brain how are different brain regions connected in certain way with each other. So we have the functional approach that is relates that certain like the left motor cortex is activated, so it's like functioning correlated with other parts of the brain, and we have the anatomical one, so the structural connectomics. So connectome being a word to emphasize that it's a network view of the brain, where we have certain measurement of a connection. So these are the edges, and that link in this way that link different neural units. So the nodes that are regions, voxels. So there's different scales. So this is the connectome. Why the name was coined like that. So the interesting thing with connectomics, or how to get there, is like it starts. It's a way. So we are fusioning together different types of images. So from T1, from this structural image, we have tissue based. So we can parcellate the brain in different regions based in some method, usually an atlas. So this subdivides the brain, the cortex and subcortical structures into regions. Then we have from DWI, so from diffusion MRI, tractography. So how these regions are connected with white matter, with axons. And from functional, we can have a resting state with fMRI, how these different regions are correlated with each other. So we have the structural connectome from the diffusion, and we have the functional connectome from the time series, from the resting state. And with it, then we can have a really nice framework, like a common denominator, a way that to compare, as I said before, how is my brain different from yours? How is the brain of this group of patients different from the controls or even subset of patients? And there's some really interesting and nice applications that I'm going to go in the end, some examples. And with this mathematical framework, so with this, a network, so it's basically a matrix, a square with rows and columns where each there's a number in each position that is an indication, a measurement of how region A is connected to region B, A is connected to C, so on and so forth. So in this way, we can represent it in different ways. We can also extract and apply graph theory. How are there hubs? Are there specific nodes that are more connected to the rest of the brain or not? What happens? We can simulate what happens if there's damage in that particular node or in that particular edge, and what happens then to the propagation of information. So there's lots of really new and interesting work in this field that if you're not familiar, I encourage to keep an eye on. And I think we'll hear a lot more with Gustavo Deco for sure, and probably with the others as well. Where is all this going? So there's like some trends in the field of visualization, of neuroimaging and visualization. So 3D printing, it's there, and I think the other day GE just made a deal with a company to make it even easier that doctors can 3D print brains or tumors or different sections to help them with their planning and with their work. You have here like a really nice 3D printed brain from Liemans, from a guy in Belgium and Utrecht. It was really nice from an exhibition. We printed already in 2003 13. I think this was my brain. So like, how is my brain connected? Like so it's nice to have it in your own hands. We were talking yesterday actually about that. Besides, can be really useful to help plan a surgery, for recovery of patients, for instance. There was a nice application in Netherlands, another company, where they 3D printed a patient's brain and the tumor. Funny or interesting enough, most of the patients didn't want to see that before the surgery, like because it was, I think, like actually seeing it was a bit odd. But after the surgery, that was actually help with the recovery, like for them to physically have something that represents this. This was my tumor. Now it's out. So that help in their in a way neurofeedback or optimism. Other hot trends you probably saw, like already seen Oculus Rift and these 3D goggles, like for virtual reality, usually in exhibitions and other places. Where, like you put the goggles and you're in the virtual space and you see people moving their arms with like crazy, but they're actually in this immersive world and interacting with some objects, some virtual objects. But this is also catching up, and I think it was HP. This is from HP. Yeah, obviously. So they have like this video and this new technology to bring virtual reality to help surgeons, for instance, plan a surgery beforehand. So to have literally and virtually their hands inside a virtual brain. We also had to experiment with it. So we put this is actually a brain with multiple sclerosis. I don't know if you can see it because it goes fast, but we have the fibers and there's some small red boxes. Those are the white matter lesions in this patient. So this is a way, like with virtual reality with Albert, like is seeing these in 3D. So it's like inside the brain and looking around. Well, I don't know if anybody has Oculus. We have the app for free online, so you can just download and play with it. Quite fun. But to get a bit more serious again, some applications. So how all of this like comes together, and some examples of things that we are doing, different projects and different studies that we are helping, that our system is being used to. Very quickly to summarize, so from all these different images, there's different kind of algorithms, tools that can be applied to the data and that measure different things. So there's essentially, let's say, three groups. Morphometrics, so from the structural images, the T1, the black and white, or T1, T2, flare. So from those kind of images, we can measure volumes, segments, white matter, white matter, gray matter, some structures, intracranial volume. So these are usually proxies or markers, imaging markers for atrophy, for degeneration. So these are like a value, more physical, more structural. Then we have connectivity measurements from diffusion MRI. There's different techniques, but like the structural connectome, the functional connectome. So these are measurements more complex. These are these matrix on how different brain regions are connected in a certain way with each other. So it's more of a circuit, let's say a system kind of measurements, more a global picture of the brain or subregions, subcircuits. And then we can put these tools together into more complex pipelines to what we call advanced tools to do more specific measurements and metrics. So some examples. Psychiatric disorders are quite interesting, and it's actually a huge problem because if the expert, if we look at an image, at an MRI of a patient with obsessive compulsive disorder, for instance, there's nothing different or there's nothing wrong. There's nothing that you can really spot in the image. And there's very subtle differences and very subtle details that are actually different in these black and white images, in all these black and white images, but it's impossible for the human eye to spot this. But with connectomics, what we saw with in this study, so with obsessive compulsive disorder, we looked at the group of about 100 patients versus controls, like 50 or so controls. And by extracting the structural connectome and then seeing what are the connections that are different from the group of patients and the group of controls, we could actually see the indications that there is some subcircuits that are different between these two groups. And especially, and that made sense, the subcircuit of the emotional information, so like the subcortical regions with the frontal cortex, this subcircuit is different from these two groups. So this can be a really valuable marker to help psychologists, psychiatrists in determine, is a disorder or what it is, like what subset or what sub-specific pathology the patient has. Is the treatment working well? So it's really powerful technique for psychiatry. For tumors is also extremely powerful. In this image, I don't know if you can see here. There's a bit darker blob, so there is a tumor there that you can see normally in the T1. But what's useful for a neurosurgeon before the intervention is to know, okay, the tumor is here and how far it is from the motor connection on the left side, on the right, or is the language, or is the vision. So to help them to plan the surgery, like if I go through this way, the tumor is very close to the motor connection, so I might have the risk of damaging this motor connection, and my patient is a pianist. Maybe, okay, let's not go through this way, but let's go through another one where if there is a risk of losing some other capability, it's not so bad for the patient. So this is like putting together the structural, the T1, where we have the tumor, and some specific white matter tracks. We are doing also work with deep learning. It's a very powerful technique in AI, and we have here a bunch of examples that were manually segmented of patients of images where the tumor was segmented by an expert, so in different tissues, let's say, so substructures, edema, enhancing tissue, necrotic tissue. So then we built this deep learning network, work of Santi, like learning, so teaching the computer, like these are examples of tumors, how they look like, and we can have like some really remarkable examples of now doing it automatically. And we can compare here what was the ground truth, what did the person know. It's a bit small, but we have here the three different substructures and the automatic one, and it's very, very accurate. And we have like even some simpler version where the differences that from the automatic algorithm, then we go back to the expert, and then they said like, actually, yes, that's true. Like what was different, we missed it. That is the correct one. So it's like these are very, very powerful techniques, and they are becoming very popular by amassing huge amounts of data, structured data, and then teaching the computer to make these to improve the workflow basically. Multiple sclerosis is another pathology that we're working very, very hard on it. So you might know MS is like the disease of thousand faces because there's huge variation. So there's these lesions, white matter lesions, like small blobs that appear small blobs in the images, and these lesions are random. Until now, it's not really clear how they appear. So basically, your immune system or one immune system is like attacking your own brain. So it's basically there's the nerve cells, the axons, and the myelin starts to be destroyed. So that kind of creates, imagine like if it's a cable, it starts to destroy the isolation of the plastic. So that causes difficulties on how, or delays on how the information is propagating, and even eventually or potentially the whole nerve starts to degenerate and then disappears. So these are random lesions, and there's a big problem in linking actual symptoms to the images, to the biological differences. So there's like, it's all based until now, it's all based on evaluating or trying to measure the symptoms. So for instance, this kind of tests with counting the letters or doing motor exercises. The standard measurement in MS is the EDSS scale, which is very much motor, like how many steps can a patient do, less and less, so that increases the scale. But then if you talk with a neurologist, they have this contradiction, because sometimes they see, if they look at the images, there's lots and lots of lesions, and the person is perfectly fine, no symptom. But then next day maybe cannot walk, or doesn't feel the left side, or cannot see. So what's other patients, they have one or two lesions in the image and are very bad with respect with symptoms. So there's like a contradiction here. And what we are investigating and help others investigate with some multi-site studies, like perhaps it's not the amount of lesions, but where they are. What are these connections that are damaged? Because if it's damaged, like in this case, this is the optic radiation. I have another picture here. Yeah. So the optic radiation are part of it. So connecting the the thalamus to the visual cortex. So by just looking at this subcircuit and then evaluating where are the lesions, you can also see a really nice correlation between the visual damage or the visual impairment and the damage in this circuit. And putting together the track segmentation tool, so this tool that we created to segment some fascicles of interest, so you can have an automatic way to divide these connections in a systematic and reproducible way, and then relate that with the lesions and count, and have like eventually a nice automatic imaging marker, a marker that says that the visual pathway is 20% damaged, the motor is 10, and under a clinical trial, a new potential treatment. Now, 6 months after, the visual damage is 10%, it decreased or not. So this is the power of this kind of techniques. The same track segmentation tool is very powerful as well, because it allows, for instance, to work and to discriminate or help discriminate if a patient that had like an accident, is it mild trauma or is it actually a traumatic brain injury, like more mild or more severe? Because there's some difficulties in the neurologist to assess this, and that can determine like which kind of treatment it will be more adequate for the patient. So this is a way to compare again automatically different fascicles, so different connections, and to compare them to what should be normal, like comparing to with a normative database. This is in fact something that has been lacking in neurology or neuroscience and in the brain. Like eventually, that same way that now is quite standard, that we go to have like a blood analysis, right? And you have your like the report that your cholesterol is this much, your red blood cells is this value, and the norm for your age, gender is between this and this. So you have like a nice measurements to help like, okay, determine what's the disease. Eventually, would be great when we have this for the brain, where you have a report, your connection A to B is very different from what it should be. Let's see what's happening there. With all of this, coming back to the challenge, is that there is more and more information, there's more and more data. The scanners are also becoming more powerful. There's more resolution. There's new kinds of images. There are more algorithms that transform these black and white images into other kind of information. So we made like this short video that goes very fast, but as we're talking that we have a pixel, a slice that is bigger, we have a volume with more slices, more megabytes, a diffusion image that has more volumes, more megabytes, tractographic, 500 more, morphology can have 500 more, a connectome in the end can have 1.5 gigas. We have a study, it's already big. You have an imaging center, 1,000 subjects, gonna be talking already of 73 terabytes. And I'm sure that we're gonna hear UK Biobank talking about 10,000, 100,000 patients. So I cannot imagine the sheer amount of data and the difficulties that then are a problem in the field. And I know that in many other hackathons, there's also like Russell Poldrack and a bunch of other people talking about these problems of reproducibility, the problems of there's difficulties with the way that like local infrastructures are set up in the centers, in the universities. So this effort of moving things to the cloud and using the power of computation that is becoming more and more a commodity. So that's the problems with R&D, the difficulty of standardization of all these modalities, the different ways of processing resting state. There's different philosophies, there's different algorithms. People publish an algorithm, put it online. Some other PhD downloads it from another country, tries to reproduce exactly the same as in the paper. The results are a bit different. What happened? I forgot some parameters. So there's all these difficulties in standardization on the data and on the algorithms. Issues with data quality. There's, like problems sometimes in communication. So things get lost, or the I'm sure that everybody or sometimes is familiar that the protocol is ABCD, and for some reason the technician made ABCDF, or AB and slight variation because the resolution it was a bit faster if it was like that. So there's always problems like these introduce errors or variation in your studies, and it's like there are problems in evaluating all of the data quality. Lack of standards. So there's what I said before with in-house scripts, algorithms that are like everybody is like building their algorithms, not really a common way to organize these and share also the algorithms. So to collaborate, and the same problems not only in more academic framework, but then they kind of transpire or they go also to clinical trials. Still, they are in a study. Still, there are the top hospitals in US or in Europe. They burn a CD, ship the CD to the other organization that are running clinical trials. Then they have an army of neurologists doing things manually, making Excel a report, sending that to pharma. So there's huge problems also in that industry. So there's amazing initiatives out there to standardize, to make science more reproducible. Yeah, I like this quote from McGill that we are doing a really shitty job, and it's not that we're not trying, but it is a complex problem. So that's we are following that and believing that because we were also suffering in dealing with kind of studies. So that's coming back to what we're doing at QMENTA is not only creating and standardizing algorithms and helping others as well, like scientists and academics, to share the algorithms and bring them to the data. So simplifying and accelerating these workflows, but then also helping that these tools and these markers can more rapidly pass to the industry, to pharma, to clinical trials, eventually to clinical use, and really help accelerating what we know about brain diseases and what we don't know about brain disease. And related to that, like Albert already mentioned yesterday, so we have the challenge that is going to be ongoing for about a month for the other event, where I think everybody was here perhaps yesterday. So it's like basically in our cloud platform, you can just register there, and you'll have a project that has will have 1,000 subjects covering from young ages from 20 years old to 89. All of these data sets, the raw T1, so the full brain with the skull, but also processed data, so with these measurements of volumes of different brain regions, how big they are, how thick they are, and the challenge is can you identify certain test cases? How old are those brains? So where are they in this range? If you have any questions, just come to us afterwards, or just shoot an email to info at QMENTA. And just to finalize, so we are, as I said in the beginning, we are working hard in these difficult problems in data management, in standardizing algorithms, bringing the algorithms to academia, bringing these tools into clinical trials, into clinical use. But we are all, feeling this or identifying with this goal, with this purpose, working hard, playing hard as well. And we are growing. This is the last picture 2 weeks ago or a week ago. We made 5 years, so we are 23 people and some extras once in a while. But we are hiring as well. We're always looking for more uh, driven people that are working hard in this kind of challenges. So just also shoot an email, can talk, collaborate. We are not really up for that. Because it's another nice quote from Jordan from Atlanta. So he's a neurosurgeon, crazy guy, but he's So this is a great time to be a brain geek. Like it's the best time alive. Like some people even say, like it's like the golden age of neuroscience. There's great technology. There's lots of interest for even selfish reasons, right? The baby boom generation. There's more and more people, but also there's lots of an incredible problem out there with healthcare. So join us, work with us. Anything that we can help to speed this up, we are here. You can just reach me at Paulo at QMENTA, my Twitter, our Twitter, Medium, blog, Twitter, all of these things. So I'll leave this slide here, and if you have any questions, just shoot. I know it's morning. Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be arranged because not like super. So there's of course a variation. There's a Gaussian somewhere there, but is to guess the age of these data sets with a twist that all of these are healthy. Well, they are supposedly healthy, but there's 5%, so there will be about 50 that are diagnosed as Alzheimer's. So these will be outliers or not. So it's so if something there's odd, there's a group that really sticks out or that is different from the rest, probably you are onto something. No. Challenge. But there are not so many. So you will be training, like this is how the model or how the healthy brain develops, right? Like there's like a trend of degeneration or not. And there might be potentially something that doesn't really fit in this trend, some outliers, and those might be the cases. So there's kind of a two parts of this.
Yesterday, Austin was talking about fMRI, also EEG from the people from the Instituto Cajal. So we have different modalities, but I think one of the main challenges that there are today in neuroscience is how to mix. For example, this diffusion imaging with functional imaging. So can you explain some useful or advantages that we can obtain for this mixing of modalities and the limitation of them?
It's already like in what you mentioned. So these different modalities, they measure different things and they have different spatial resolution and temporal resolution, right? So you have MRI that from one side it can give information about the structure of the brain, the different tissues, right? Volumes and these kind of measurements. With the diffusion, then you can measure how in a macroscopic scale, so in the millimeter scale, how different regions are connected to each other physically by these axons. With resting state, you can have how different regions, still in a couple of millimeters, almost centimeters, how these different brain regions are functionally correlated, but in a time scale that is bigger, right, in seconds, minutes. So a resting state is normally 7, 10, 14 minutes of like a time series every 3 or 4 seconds. So there's a picture of how the brain is fluctuating in seconds time scale. And with EEG, we have like much shorter time frame. So there's like in the milliseconds. So you can really see, there's the typical examples of if you see pictures of faces, there's like some spikes after a couple of milliseconds that are very characteristic. However, the spatial resolution is more coarse. So you have nowadays you can have like 256 nodes. So that's like on the skull, so on the outside of the brain. So with EEG, you have really short and small temporal resolution, but more coarse spatial resolution, and also from the outside of the brain, so more of the cortex. With functional MRI, you have longer time scale, but it is a 3D image, so you also have the functional time series from internal brain structures, and from the rest, you have like much slower time scale, like the structure of the brain changes in the scale of months or years when you're learning something, but you have much smaller spatial resolution. So if you put everything together, so if you register and fusion all those information, you have different points of view, or a more complete picture. Yeah, well, pictures as well, but a more complete picture of how is the brain functioning in this kind of spatially and temporally. There are efforts in doing this together, like in having EG, well, what do you call? Yeah, and that are able to go inside the MRI scanner. So then you already are acquiring information in the same space, so without having to do some um, mathematical and computational algorithms to put this information together, which can introduce noise. So with that, you can have already a picture, a 3D picture, and a temporal short time scale.
But I mean, do you know if there is something already found that if we mix these two types of imaging, we can see this problem of this disease? But if we do it separately, we can see it. Do you know if there is something like that already, or is just trying to find something?
I know this is quite recent because of like the let's say the physical challenges of creating the EG helmet, or the cap to go inside the brain. I think some people in Barcelona, in Hospital Clinic, Maves Sanchez, so they are working a lot with animal models and like electrodes, so kind of EG, but like more small. And they were also working in combining these two techniques. So I would look into them to see what is happening.
The functional connectivity and the structural connectivity network. In a normal brain, how much of the functional connectivity can be explained by the structural connectivity that you can get with this?
I'm guessing that Gustavo Deco will be talking about that a lot, because there's so he has been working a lot, and there are studies that both are related, and actually his work, they are using the structural and the functional to improve in the end result. So kind of combine both, using the functional to improve the structural information, and the structure, and the other way around. So kind of a feedback loop. Like they are related, but the challenge there is like region A might be functionally connected with region C, but not directly connected with an axon. Maybe this one is the axons go to the front of the brain and then go back and then go to the other side. So there's like in the roads, you can go from here to Barcelona in many different ways, shorter or longer.
But then in that case, the correlation should be lower, no? Because they're able to see that.
It's a whole field of discussion, but the work, I bet that that's going to be covered in the afternoon. Or
Okay, so you guys work really beautiful images. But I wanted to ask, what's y'all's favorite parcellation method? Seeing as a lot of connectivity based off of your node definition or your seed-based definition. So how do you guys, what's your recommendation or what's your preferred method for parcellating and defining nodes?
Yeah, we are fans of Ant as well. So with Ant is very powerful and versatile and fast. So we tend to choose ants and then also with different atlases, right? With different templates and different atlas, because there's also like AEN and different schemes of what is the correct way of parcellating. So we are generic and flexible. So right, we have different tools, Reserve for ants, FSL and others. And the people that use the platform, then they might have a preference, so they can choose. But when we do, like we built a structural connectome pipeline, we prefer ants. We have both with Reserve with ants, but we create like for something else another method, a more complex workflow to segment some subcortical structures. And FreeSurfer, for instance, could do the job, took 10 hours. We did it different way with ants, takes 1 hour, same result or even better. So ants is.
I'm another guy. I'm sitting in another city, so I have. Okay, so which considered is the current limitation in diffusion? I mean, in which sense or in which direction are working people who work in diffusion imaging? There are something like functional diffusion imaging that can offer a different kind of information, or just in resolution, or
So the diffusion field, there's kind of two groups or two directions. One is the macro scale or macroscopic connectome, so like this connectivity at the level of like axons, so like these kind of pictures that we're showing. And then there's the other side or the other subgroup that are the microstructure. So using diffusion and these the same acquisitions with some variation of parameters. So doing what is called like multi-shell. So taking two pictures, so two diffusion images with different the B value, so a different parameter in the scanner, and so then we have a diffusion volume with one parameter and with the other, and by combining this information, then you can extract more microstructure information in each voxel that relates to the axon diameter and how tightly packed or not are the axons. So this is also very interesting and powerful information for some disorders. For instance, MS is another case. So what happens? How are in the white matter lesions? What happened with myelin and how are the axons? So there's basically these two main directions. And within the first one, the macro scale, there's the local modeling group. So like how to improve that the accuracy of the direction of the fibers is like more and more precise, given it's quite technical, but that is this issue of it is a voxel, right? So like it's a millimeter, and within this millimeter, there's thousands of axons, and you can have fibers in this direction and completely opposite in the same voxel, and you have issues in determining this. So there's like if you have like this kind of more tightly oriented population of fibers, it becomes like more difficult to distinguish and to know that there are two. So there's like there's kind of groups that are working to having this distance, so like being more and more fine, more and more precise in spotting these different populations. These are basically the different directions in diffusion. And graph based. Well, in the end, the graph based as well.
Okay, the last one, I promise. There are other kind of contrast to get diffusion imaging instead of water. I mean, in DTI, you are like some kind of diffusion of water.
There's other modeling like kurtosis, but still comes by the same. Well, there are contrast agents, but not really for diffusion. However, a year or 2 years ago, there's a new potential field from Levian, like one of the parents of diffusion. It's like functional diffusion. So using like the movement of water and how does that relate to different tissue like activation. So instead of in a way evaluating the blood, right, the oxygenation, the both signals like from diffusion.
So we tried that a few times and it failed spectacularly. Just because we have a crazy physicist who's like, oh, I want to try this. We were not able to get it to work.
it's nice to have those kind of people around. So then like, yeah, let's try this. Yeah, thank you.
We have a time for the break.
Mm.
Las cosas importantes con vosotros. Gracias.
Por fin.
Por fin. Igual, ya llega un momento de que... Bueno. Oye, lo arreglo bastante bien. Sí, cosas como la mayoría de la gente son bien. Casi 50. Y ahora bueno, pero ya. Pues